Imagine waking up tomorrow and the world you know has vanished, replaced by a raw, untamed wilderness that hasn't changed for 10,000 years. No Wi-Fi, no electric lights, no grocery aisles, just the sound of wind through ancient trees and a sky that has watched countless generations rise and fall. Your phone lies silent in your hand, its screen dark, and the familiar hum of the city is replaced by the distant call of a raven and the rustle of leaves. Could a mind trained on algorithms, traffic reports, and instant messages survive in the Stone Age? Let's step into that impossible day and see what it would take to stay alive. You are a modern person thrust back into a time when fire was a miracle, tools were chipped from stone, and every bite of food could be your last. In the next few minutes, we'll walk through the exact steps you'd need to secure water, spark a fire, build shelter, and survive that first night. First, we'll tackle the shock of the moment, then we'll move to the basics of water, fire, and shelter, and finally we'll reflect on why those three things are the foundation of any human's chance to live. The first thing that hits you is the sheer disorientation. Your brain is still trying to process the familiar sounds of traffic and the glow of streetlights, but all you hear is the chorus of insects and the rush of a nearby stream. Your mind races to a mental checklist: water, fire, shelter, safety. The first priority is water, because dehydration can knock you out in less than a day. You scan the horizon for a fresh source, look for a clear, moving stream rather than a stagnant pool, and follow it upstream to find the cleanest water. Even without a modern filter, you can improvise a simple filtration system using layers of sand, small stones, and charcoal collected from a burnt branch, all held in a hollowed piece of bark. Pour the water through this makeshift filter into a clean container, perhaps a metal can you salvaged from a discarded campsite, and you've bought yourself precious hours. Next comes fire, the heart of survival. Fire gives you warmth, protection from predators, a way to cook food, and a signal to the night. You have two options depending on what you can scavenge. If you happen to have a lighter or a piece of steel in your pocket, you can strike it against flint to create sparks. Otherwise, you'll need to rely on the ancient bow drill method. First, you carve a straight spindle from a dry hardwood branch, then you notch a fireboard, another piece of wood with a small depression. A flexible branch serves as the bow, and a cord made from plant fibers becomes the string. By moving the bow back and forth, you spin the spindle fast enough to generate friction, producing a hot ember. Once you have that ember, you nurture it with dry tinder-dry grass, bark shavings, or even the inner bark of a cedar tree until it catches. The crackle of the first flame is a sound you'll never forget, a beacon of hope in the darkness. With fire lit, you turn to shelter. The night will bring cold, rain, and the unknown sounds of nocturnal predators. You have two basic choices: seek out a natural cave or construct a simple lean-to. A cave offers immediate protection, but may already be occupied by animals. If you find a dry, elevated spot on a hillside, you can build a lean-to by propping a long branch against a sturdy trunk, then layering smaller branches and leaves to create a roof that sheds rain. The fire should be placed at the entrance, both to keep the wind out and to deter curious beasts. As the flames dance, you dry your clothes, keep a watchful eye on the shadows, and let the heat seep into your bones. The psychological impact of that first night is profound. The darkness feels endless. The unfamiliar sounds can be terrifying, but the glow of the fire reminds you that you still have control. If you manage to secure water, fire, and shelter within the first 12 hours, you've already beaten 90% of prehistoric mortality. Those three pillars give you the chance to think beyond survival and start planning for the days ahead. You'll need to consider how to store food, how to protect yourself from insects and disease, and how to use your modern knowledge to improve your odds. But for now, the simple act of lighting a fire and feeling its warmth is a triumph that bridges 10,000 years of human ingenuity. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now, as the night fades and the first pale light of dawn stretches across the horizon, you awaken to a world that feels both alien and familiar. The fire you tended through the darkness still smolders, its orange glow a reminder that you have already conquered one of humanity's oldest challenges. The air is crisp, scented with pine and damp earth, and the chorus of birds begins to swell, announcing a new day. Your mind, still buzzing with the shock of the sudden temporal shift, starts to organize the tasks that will define the next hours, the next days, and perhaps the next months. The first priority after securing water, fire, and shelter is to assess your immediate surroundings. Scan the terrain for signs of edible plants, animal tracks, and natural resources that can be turned into tools. Your modern education has given you a mental catalog of edible versus poisonous flora, but the reality of tasting a wild berry in the wild is far more visceral than any textbook illustration. You remember the rule that if you cannot positively identify a plant, you must treat it as dangerous. To test a new fruit, you can use the universal method of rubbing a small piece on your skin, waiting a few minutes, and then tasting a minuscule amount. This cautious approach may feel tedious, but it dramatically reduces the risk of accidental poisoning. Next, you turn your attention to hunting and gathering. The knowledge you carry about animal behavior, trapping techniques, and basic anatomy can give you a decisive edge over the prehistoric inhabitants who relied on instinct and tradition. You can fashion a simple spear by sharpening a sturdy branch with a stone flake, a skill you learned from watching a quick tutorial on primitive toolmaking before the world changed. The spearhead, though crude, can be used to hunt small game such as rabbits or birds. For larger prey, you might construct a basic pitfall trap, digging a shallow depression and covering it with branches and leaves, camouflaged with fresh foliage. The key is patience and observation. Watch the patterns of animal movement, learn where they feed, and set your traps accordingly. While you experiment with hunting, you also need to think about food preservation. In a world without refrigeration, the ability to dry or smoke meat becomes essential. The fire you have already built can serve as a drying rack. By hanging strips of meat over a low, steady flame, you can dehydrate the protein, extending its shelf life for several days. If you have access to dry herbs or smoke-producing wood, you can add flavor and further inhibit bacterial growth. This knowledge, drawn from modern culinary science, could be the difference between a week of sustenance and a sudden bout of foodborne illness. Water management is another critical component of your survival strategy. While you have located a fresh stream for immediate consumption, you must also consider the long-term availability of clean water. Building a simple sand and charcoal filter using a hollowed-out log, layers of sand, and charcoal from burnt wood can dramatically improve water quality, removing sediments and some pathogens. Boiling water over your fire is the most reliable method to ensure safety, and the practice of maintaining a small kettle or metal container if you manage to salvage one from the remnants of a modern settlement can become a daily ritual that reinforces your sense of control. As the sun climbs higher, you begin to think beyond the immediate necessities. The human brain is wired to seek patterns, to plan, to imagine a future beyond the present moment. You start to sketch a rough map of the surrounding area, marking the location of the water source, the shelter, and potential hunting grounds. This mental cartography helps you navigate and also provides a framework for future expansion. You might decide to clear a small clearing near the water, creating a more permanent campsite that can be fortified with a simple palisade made from sharpened stakes. This defensive structure can deter curious predators and give you a sense of security during the night. Your modern understanding of hygiene also becomes a silent ally. In a world where parasites and infections run rampant, simple practices such as washing your hands with clean water before handling food, keeping wounds covered with clean bark strips, and avoiding contact with animal feces can dramatically reduce the risk of disease. You might fashion a basic soap using ash and animal fat, a technique known to ancient peoples but refined by your knowledge of chemistry. The act of cleaning yourself and your tools becomes a ritual that not only protects your health, but also reinforces a mental boundary between the chaos of the wild and the order you are imposing. By the end of the first week, you have established a reliable source of water, a steady fire, a shelter that shields you from the elements, and a modest stockpile of dried meat and gathered plants. You have also crafted a few basic tools: a stone knife, a wooden spear, a simple bow perhaps, if you manage to shape a flexible branch, and a sturdy string from plant fibers. Each of these achievements feels like a small victory, a step toward bridging the gap between 21st century knowledge and 10,000-year-old survival instincts. The second week brings new challenges. The novelty of the environment begins to wear off, and the reality of long-term survival sets in. You notice that the initial excitement of mastering fire and shelter gives way to a deeper, more persistent need for community. Humans are social creatures, and even a lone survivor eventually feels the pull of companionship. You might hear distant voices, perhaps a small band of hunter-gatherers moving through the forest. Their language is unfamiliar, their customs foreign, yet there is an opportunity here. Your ability to communicate, to share knowledge, could become a catalyst for cultural exchange. If you approach them with respect, offering a piece of dried meat or a useful tool, you may forge an alliance that dramatically improves your odds of survival. Imagine a scenario where you teach a group of prehistoric people how to create a more efficient fire-starting method using a bow drill, or how to construct a simple water filter. In return, they teach you the art of tracking, the locations of seasonal fruit trees, and the rhythms of the natural world that have guided their ancestors for millennia. This exchange of knowledge creates a symbiotic relationship, blending modern scientific insight with ancient experiential wisdom. Over months, you could see the emergence of a small settlement that incorporates both stone tools and rudimentary metalworking, perhaps even a primitive kiln for firing clay pots, a technology that would have been unimaginable to the original inhabitants. As the seasons change, you must adapt to new environmental pressures. Winter brings cold, snow, and scarcity of food. Your fire-making skills become a matter of life and death. As you learn to insulate your shelter with layers of animal hides and pine boughs, you might learn to hunt larger game, such as deer, using a spear with a stone tip, or to trap fish in icy streams using simple weirs. The knowledge of preserving meat by smoking becomes crucial, allowing you to store protein through the lean months. Your understanding of nutrition guides you to balance your diet, ensuring you get enough calories and essential vitamins, preventing the dreaded winter ailments that plagued many ancient peoples. By the time a full year has passed, you have transformed from a bewildered modern individual into a competent member of a fledgling community. You have contributed to the development of tools, shared fire-making techniques, and perhaps even introduced the concept of a simple calendar based on the solar cycle, helping the group anticipate seasonal changes. The psychological shift is profound. The fear that once gripped you each night has softened into a steady confidence. You have learned to read the sky, to anticipate storms, to recognize the signs of animal migration. In turn, the people around you have adopted some of your habits. Perhaps they now wash their hands before meals, or they use ash to clean their cooking vessels. Looking back, the initial triumph of lighting a fire was only the first ripple in a vast pond of possibilities. Each subsequent decision, how to filter water, how to preserve food, how to build shelter, how to interact with other humans, has compounded, creating a trajectory that could lead to the rebirth of a civilization. The question remains, could you, armed with 21st century knowledge, not only survive, but also lay the foundations for a new society that blends the best of both worlds? The answer, like the ember you first coaxed from the friction of wood, depends on the care you give it, the patience you practice, and the willingness to adapt.